Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to be going over an introduction to oil washes and some pros and cons of them. I've done the Kilcrusha all-in oil washes, as I said in my previous video, and the result is fantastic. If I can see if I can get some light and some close-ups here. This is the, I don't want to touch that part, it's still wet. Move it up here, I didn't do any oil washes. You can see everything is toned down, the brightness is gone, and there's some very nice details with the oil washes on here. It just came out perfect. So there's a lot of it took me a long time to get into deciding to go for the oil washes, and money was definitely a factor. Not so much for the oil paints themselves. I picked up this set of oil paints at, I think it was Michael's, for $5, and it's absolutely perfect. It's got burnt umber, burnt sienna, black, red, and a great ochre color, which happens to match my orc basing. So it was really great. These aren't, I mean, they are cheap paints, and I noticed I really had to mix them really well to get a good pigment saturation. Otherwise, I would kind of get chunks once in a while. But that was no big deal. So just a good mix on these paints, and they were fine. Again, this whole set was $5, and I should probably never have to buy another oil paint as long as I hobby. For maybe the burnt umber, maybe. So I did a lot of detail work. But that's not really, so the paints themselves can get pretty cheap. This is the expensive part right here, is this odorless thinner. This little bottle here, you're probably going to be hard-pressed to find this for under $10 pretty much anywhere. I think I got a good price on this, was like $11.99 or something like that at Joann's. Not that far from me. But you definitely want to do an odorless thinner, so you don't have to, because turpentine and other oil thinners are really, really strong. This one is still combustible, it's still, dangerous to use in an enclosed room, but it is odorless, and it's a lot easier to use than turpentine or something like that. Then I picked up one of these. It's just a little syringe, squeeze bottle, whatever, to get the thinner out of the bottle without having to stick anything in there, like brushes or whatnot. And then, of course, I just got a palette. This is an old cheap palette, which I used some foil on. These are all the colors I used on the Kilcrusha. So there was the burnt sienna, or burnt umber, which is the main, like rough equivalent to Agrax Earthshade. Burnt umber, sorry, yeah, the burnt umber would be used anywhere you use Agrax Earthshade as a wash. Then I used black as soot, and like on exhausting guns. I used the burnt sienna as like a rust color, which turns out really well. I used a combination of, what is this, vermilion, which is a red, and the burnt umber to do my hydraulic fluid leaks. And then lastly, I used the ochre color for some on the tracks to kind of give the effect of ground dust. Again, we're going to show you the whole thing until it's all the way done, which is going to be a little while. So there's the basics of oil wash, and really what it comes down to is that they're really not any harder to use than your acrylic washes. They do require some extra steps. So we just take a little bit of thinner, and here in the thing, squeeze it into one of these pots. That's really it. Then just an absolute drop of the paint, because it really doesn't take very much, which actually took quite a bit to get the whole Kilcrusha done, which is ridiculous. So then we just mix up the thinner and the paint until you get about the same consistency as you get a GW wash, and then you just put it on, and that's really all there is to it. I should say that's not all there is to it, because there are some extra steps you have to go in there first. So, but anyway, using the wash itself really isn't any more difficult than using an acrylic wash. So now that we've got, and that's really all there is to it. You just wash it on. So now it's time to go over what are really all the pros and cons of oil washes. The biggest pro on the oil washes is control. Being able to control exactly how much pigment, how much tinting, how much shading you get on the models. Because what you can do is after you put it on, since it takes such a while to dry, you just take some clear thinner and a toothpick or a paper towel or a Q-tip or something, and you can wipe off the excess to get it just the point you want. And if you wipe off too much, just put some on, keep going, and try it again. Do some experimentation, and it really doesn't take a lot to, especially if you're really familiar with using the acrylic washes, using oil washes is going to be almost second nature. But the level of control on it is just outstanding. Because when I first washed this was a lot darker, so I went over everything with paper towels and Q-tips and was able to get down to just the perfect dirtied up tone that I wanted on the tank. So that is by far the biggest pro. And of course, if you have oil paints, you can use them for other things too. You don't have to use them just in a wash. I actually use the black almost straight out of the thing to just kind of like streak on some black soot around the exhaust pipes and at the end of the barrel. Again, I'm not going to show it to you. Maybe I can sneak in the barrel without showing off too much of the tank. There's just the end of the barrel. You can see I just kind of took the black and streaked down using the brush to get a sooty effect. Soot covered effect, whatever. It's funny. So there's other options, and you can read online, how to weather with oil paints. There's a lot of people that do it. There's a lot of good information out there. So you can use the oil paints for more than just washes. So that's always a great advantage. In fact, I wish I would have had the black oil wash to do my DACA jets instead of using the Newman oil, however it's pronounced. So that's the biggest pro. Another pro is you can keep using your existing brushes. You don't have to have special brushes for the oil paints because it does wash off the brush with the same brush soap. Everyone does have brush soap, right? So it just washes off your brushes in this just as well as the acrylic washes do, or acrylic paints do. So keeping your brushes clean is not an issue whatsoever. So you don't have to get extra brushes for that. So you can get the better effects without having to spend any extra money on brushes. And really, this is only my second project with oil washes, and it just came out so well that I just can't. It's amazing. The first thing I did was the panel lines on the Storm Raven was the first thing I ever did with an oil wash, and that was just so quick and easy with the capillary action that I'm going to keep doing that in the future. So the pro and why you want to use the oil washes is the controlling the level of the tinting and washing on the model, which you just don't get with the acrylic washes. But they dry too fast, and they can get very spotty if you do in several different layers. So what are some of the cons? There's a lot of cons to them too. I'm not gonna lie. The biggest con, of course, is the cost of the thinner. Of course, that little bottle there is going to last a long time too. So it's not like going to run out anytime soon, but it is going to run out before the paints do. Some of the other cons is that you do have to gloss varnish the model before using the oil washes. So you have to varnish. I use the Badger Minitaire gloss varnish through the airbrush. So airbrushing on a gloss varnish is by far the easiest and best way to do it. I did it with the Kill Grusha, did it with the Storm Talon, and also, well, it's not totally a waste because the gloss varnish does add extra protection to your model before you matte varnish it. So that's a big deal, is getting that gloss varnish on the model before the oil washes, and then you have to let that cure, of course, before you can start in on the wash. The other biggest con, is the drying time. It does take several days for the oil wash to dry completely, and to the point where you can matte varnish the model back down to the way it was, back down to the way you want it. I mean, this I worked on 2 days ago. It's Sunday night. This was Friday night, and this red paint here in the middle, I mean, it's still like it just came out of the bottle or out of the tube. It hasn't even dried in the very least. Some of this other stuff is starting to dry, but it's some of it just hasn't dried at all. So it takes days. You should plan on at least 3 to 4 days of drying time between the time you do the oil washes and before you can finish the model, before you get the matte varnish on and finish it up. I'm still not done with the, I mean, after the oil washes are dry, I have to get the matte varnish on, and then I have to do some pigments, especially on the exhaust pipes. So there's still a lot of work to do on the Kill Crusher, and it's going to be probably another week before it's done. So that's about it. I would definitely encourage people to try out oil washes. It's worth the $20 investment. I mean, if you want to get a good paint, a good couple of paints, stick with the burnt umber, the burnt sienna, and the black. Those will be your 3 main wash colors, basically the same colors you use now in the Aggressor shade, human oil, and sepia, Seraphim sepia. Didn't get the bottle odorless thinner. I mean, good oil paints can get very, very crazy expensive, and I think the only difference is going to be the quality of the pigments and the grain of the pigments and stuff like that. So for the scale of the Kill Crusher and the scale of just the panel lines on the Storm Talon, these cheap paints did an amazing job. Just have to be careful, because there are some spots where they did clump up. I could tell the grains weren't quite mixed up enough. The pigment wasn't quite mixed up enough, so I had to go back over it. But still, the cheap paints are great. Thinner's not that cheap, but still, you're going to be looking at a $20 investment to give it a try, and it's really worth it. I think it is. As I go forward, I'm going to definitely be using more and more oil washes. They're just as easy to use, and time, unless time's a factor, of course. But that's about it. So go ahead and there's my introduction to oil paints. And in a few days, when the Kill Crusher is all done, of course, there will be a showcase video on that. So I'll talk to you guys later.